I'm Chris Lee, joined by Blake Lovell. We're here to talk about SEC basketball on Tuesday, January the 4th. The results of that night. Three of the four games were pretty interesting, Blake. The one that wasn't was Auburn and South Carolina. It was exactly what we expected. But, boy, Kentucky LSU was interesting. Vandy, Arkansas went down to the wire. So did A&M and Georgia. Let's start in Baton Rouge, where the Tigers honored Dale Brown, I think, at halftime, and LSU delivered a big win in what was a big game for both programs.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how the game could play out, and I mean, certainly, I think it plays out a little bit differently based on the fact that Sahvir Wheeler only plays 4 minutes. But again, I don't. I think if you're Kentucky, you're certainly not going to be happy about a loss. But I think the way they played, even without him, was pretty good for the most part. And I think that there are some things that they can take away from this moving forward. Grady hit some big shots. Some of the other, I mean, obviously the guys off the bench, Mintz and Toppin played pretty well. So I think it was just, the dynamic of the game certainly changed, I think, without Wheeler, because we've talked about it, just how much he handles the ball. And I mean, he was the guy we talked about most, I think, going into the game. We talked about LSU's defense and how it's going to be important, for him to play a big role and kind of help ease some of that pressure maybe from the defense of LSU. And then only have him out there for a couple minutes of the game. It changed a lot. But I mean, give Kentucky credit. I thought they played, again, well for the most part. But then I think you have to give LSU more credit, right? Because they're the ones
Mm-hmm.
that they really made the plays down the stretch. And as we said going in, I mean, we talked about it as kind of a toss-up game, but I think even on paper, people kind of looked at it, and I know there's some people saying that this Kentucky's going to win this game, and really felt pretty confident about that. But I think it's just for some reason, I still think there may be people out there that just don't realize how good this LSU team is, and even though they're sitting here at 13-1, and we talked about it coming off that loss at Auburn, I think that was more of a Auburn's very good versus an LSU's bad. Like I think that was just that scenario and how it played out. So yeah, I mean it's a huge win for LSU, and it's kind of been I don't know what the series record's been, but I know LSU's got some good wins over Kentucky here in recent years, and this was another one. So
I want to circle back to Kentucky because there were a couple of issues that were interesting during the game, and one certainly going forward with Wheeler. But we got to talk about LSU. You mentioned the record, the start, all those things. The defense was there again last night. I don't really know what stood out in that game in terms of individuals. I thought Xavier Benson was really good at times, had 4 steals, had a couple of big buckets where he took the ball at the Kentucky defense and finished at the rim. But I guess defense was the big takeaway again because Kentucky shoots 36.2%, and other than a quick outburst by Kellen Grady, just didn't put the ball in the basket consistently.
yeah, and I mean this was kind of a physical type game as we expected, where Kentucky gets to the line 20 times, right, and only make 10 of them. I mean, it's little things like that. I mean, they're not little, and that's what we always talk about. People sometimes I know say it's like, well, free throw percentage is kind of overrated. I don't think it's overrated at all. I
Mm-mm.
think because when you get in games like this is one of those situations where it's like, completely different game if you don't shoot 50% from the free throw line, and you can just hit some of those shots and make things a little bit easier. But I still think that it's one of those, if you're like you said, I think you have to give credit to LSU, and then on the Kentucky side, there were obviously a lot of bright spots I thought for Kentucky. It's just this was a tough game. I mean, this was arguably, as we said, going up on the road against the second best team in the SEC, and I mean, it's a hard game to win no matter what, whether you're at full strength or not. And as we said, I don't think we're going to sit here and use it as an excuse or anything, but it's a different game when Sahvir Wheeler's not out there, and like that's not taking anything away from LSU because we've been the one talking about it. Like
Mm.
I just said it a second ago, I just don't think LSU still doesn't get the credit they deserve for being one of the best defensive teams in the country, and they're sitting here at 13-1 and just beat Kentucky at home. Rebounded from that loss against Auburn, and so yeah, it was a very interesting game, and I think for Kentucky, certainly Wheeler's status moving forward is the big question, and it's just there's a lot of things that he makes easier when he's on the floor, and he makes it easier for all these other guys, and when you take that element away against, as we said, one of the best defensive teams out there, it's going to be hard to win a game like that.
Has there been a diagnosis on Sahvir Wheeler's injury? I mean, it looked like, I don't want to speculate. It was certainly seemed to be a shoulder issue. I don't know if he separated something, but he left the game quickly, went to the locker room. I don't know that he hit the floor again in the first half. He certainly didn't play again, but I mean, he was, I think, in the locker room for at least the rest of the half, if not the rest of the game. He was ruled out of that one pretty quickly. So they got that going forward. Ty Washington got cramps and had to sit out part of the game. I'll tell you another thing that was curious. Oscar Tshiebwe picks up 2 fouls, 7.5, 8 minutes in? They sit him the rest of the half. I didn't agree with that. Nothing, I don't know, the whole foul logic thing has always bothered me. It's like you make something into a self-fulfilling prophecy out of fear, the thing that you're trying to prevent. I didn't agree with sitting him on the bench the entire last 11.5 minutes of the first half, Blake.
Here's why I'm okay with it. I think it's because of how he plays, and I think that, I mean, he's like this guy has just full on like energy, aggression, like this. I think that's probably the thinking there is this is a guy that, is so active in terms of rebounding and impacting shots and those kind of things that I just think it's how he plays. It's probably why you make that decision. And like you said, I think you can certainly question whether or not or how the game plays out if you don't do that. But that's my guess is probably the thinking behind it is because it just, I mean, he is like he's a beast. Like, and it's just I think just the way he plays, and I also think it would probably be very easy for LSU to find ways to put him in that position to pick up that third foul. And I know that's more of it's a conservative way to look at it, but I think that it's, if it's a guard, I think maybe it's a little bit different, if it's a different style of player, but I just think the way he plays, that's probably a big part of it. So,
the other thing, I don't know how much people are talking about this. Did you see Lance Ware get the yips at the foul line last night?
I mean, it's free throws, man. It's an interesting deal sometimes. And I know it's like we look at it from the outside, right? But we've seen that with players, over the years. I mean, we probably point out other situations if we could find it. Like it's just sometimes the free throw aspect is like I don't know, it's such an interesting dynamic because you think it's something that's so simple, but it can't be. So like it's just for some guys it's not, and I think that it just it happens. So
yeah, what started, I don't know if you saw it because we were watching basically 3 games at once at our various homes, and the first one he took a foul shot. I want to say in the first half, and he missed it wide left all the way. Like it was off the backboard and to the left. And I think you could see the wheels turning. He ended up 0 of 4 from the game, missing the 3 that followed that. But there was another thing that was interesting in the game. I thought that Jacob Toppin really gave them good minutes at times. He's a really, really good athlete. I mean, that's one bright spot you can take out of this for Kentucky is that he really, I thought, took a big step with his game last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we say. I mean, when you have a scenario play out the way that it did with, having guys that have to step up when one of your key players goes out, I mean, that's what you would expect. And I think you would expect it if you're at Kentucky. It's like that's why you build a roster you build is because you expect everyone that's available to be able to make those kind of big plays. And yeah, he had a good game. And I mean, he's kind of the guy that you just look at what he did. And he kept him right there, with an opportunity. And so yeah, I thought that he played well, and obviously, Davion Mintz stepped up with Wheeler out, and again, that's kind of what you need to have at Kentucky is you need to have guys like this that can step up, and we've always talked about Kentucky teams. Yes, they've been built on stars, but the best ones have had that 7th, 8th guy that can just come in and just put a dagger, and just make shots and do those kind of things, and so. That's certainly where, I'm sure for them, they'd love to be able to see that play out here if they can get, number 6, number 7, number 8, those guys, which we've talked about those 3 with Mintz, Toppin, and Ware. But yeah, I mean, you've got to have those guys contributing, and that's where the Kentucky team is still. It's like if you just put everyone on the same night, if you can get everyone on the same page, they're going to win a lot of games. But I say all that to say that. LSU is good. Like they are very good. And I think as we talked about with LSU schedule, right? this first half of the schedule is as tough as anybody's in the SEC, but a very manageable back half, and they could be sitting pretty. And right now, I think to split these first two, you'll certainly take that, I think, if you're LSU. So
Vandy goes to Fayetteville and wins a game there, snapping a 16-game home winning streak. I want to get into Arkansas because there's a lot to unpack there, but Vandy's playing better, Blake. Scotty Pippen Jr. gets 22 points. They survive him fouling out in the final minute. Jordan Wright fouls out in the final seconds. Vandy only had 8 scholarship players for that game. That was not something I'd expected. I think people know we live in the Nashville area, so we see a lot of Vanderbilt. I just didn't think Vanderbilt had the athletes, especially banged up, to go and win in Fayetteville. And I think it does beg some questions about Arkansas, but my goodness, Vanderbilt has not been a team known for defense in a while, almost ever. But Vanderbilt's really getting after people defensively. I thought it disrupted a lot of what Arkansas wanted to do, and that's arguably Jerry Stackhouse. His last 2 games are probably the 2 biggest wins he's had since he's been at Vanderbilt, Blake.
Well, I was going to say, I think, we talked about it before, but I don't think that win over BYU sort of got enough attention, because that's not a game you would expect, Vanderbilt to win in recent years. And I think that once they prove that they can win a game like that, and this is a BYU team that, remember, this is a pretty good team. And I know they've lost, some games they'd probably like to have back, and that's one of them, but it's a pretty good team. And so I think for them to win that, maybe it's just because it's in Hawaii and not a lot of people are paying attention. And I don't know, but like that to me was sort of that, something's going on. Like they've got something, or they found something that works. And I think now you see that carry over, even though there was a little bit of a layoff, but you kind of see that carry over now into this Arkansas game. And yeah, we said coming to the season, we thought Vanderbilt, or we expected Vanderbilt to be better. But as we talked about, you expect Vanderbilt to be better based off of being really bad, in recent years. And so how much better can you be, and can you get to that point? And I think we talked about it, best case scenario in the preseason before any games were played. I thought they could be maybe the 8th best team in the SEC. Like I thought they could be right there on the NCAA tournament bubble and have a chance to be in that conversation. Are they there right now? Not yet, of course. But, if they play and prove that they can make plays the way they did last night, they can get there. They got a lot of work to do, but they can still get there. And I think we always say it, when you have one guy that can carry you, that can be a good thing, can be a bad thing, but it can be a really good thing whenever he's on. And, I know he turned the ball over and stuff, but you've still got one guy like that with Scotty Pippen who can just make things so much easier for everyone else, and he can make things really hard on the opposition. And I think we kind of see that in games like this. I think that, again, they have a better supporting cast. These guys are getting better. And I think we've talked about that. Like, improvement is a thing where I think Jerry Stackhouse done a pretty good job in terms of just developing players. And, is everyone to the all SEC level? No, but I think he's got guys that are sort of starting to find what they need to do for this team to be successful. And that is very important. And so it's a big win. We'll talk about Arkansas, I'm sure, in a second, but for Vanderbilt, that's a huge win. So
yeah, they got 15 points out of Trey Thomas. I think most of those were in the second half. He's a really streaky 3-point shooter. Rodney Chapman, the stat lines aren't much, but he's the Dayton transfer. They've really been a little bit of a different team with him. He's really an aggressive, really good defender that brings a little bit of swag that they kind of need. But, we talked about the preseason expectations and how, they could find themselves on the NCAA tournament bubble, but that was with Liam Robbins, who we didn't know was going to be unavailable. We're now almost 2 months into the season. He's not played yet. I think they're hoping to get him back in February. They can make it interesting if they can keep their head above water and then get him back, because he is a complete game changer for them. I think on both ends of the floor if they get him.
I was kind of laughing, but what are the chances we look up on January the 15th and the first place team in the SEC is Vanderbilt? Because they've got
South Carolina this Saturday,
now,
right?
They play Kentucky after that, but it's in Nashville. They're at Georgia. They're going to be the favorite maybe in 2 of those 3 games, right? But then if you can just
Right.
knock off Kentucky, if you get Kentucky on a bad night, obviously I'm saying that as the chances probably, not a lot of people are going to be betting on Vanderbilt being 4-0, but it's not out of the question.
No, it's
And
not.
again, it's, that's where you get a win like this and makes a lot more sense. Now we say that, right? They could just as easily lose to South Carolina on Saturday. And, those are the things that when you have a team like this, you hesitate a little bit because you've seen some of these other games that they played. And, but I think they're right there. Like, I think they are going to have a chance to, if they can win at Arkansas, they can certainly beat in South Carolina at home, and they can certainly win at Georgia. Now the Kentucky one's going to be tough, but still, I mean, that would, if you can start 3-1, boy, that'd be quite a start for this team. So,
Well, and sometimes it's about timing, right? I mean, they've caught Arkansas, and boy, there's a lot to unpack on Arkansas here. At a time where I thought it's advantageous to catch Arkansas right now because something is not going well. And taking nothing away from Vandy, right? They cashed in. And they did it right off the biggest win they've had in a while out in Hawaii. But the weird thing is they did it with all these guys out. I mean, again, they only had 8 guys, including Shane Dezzoni was out, who's part of their rotation. Jermaine Mann, who's their 6th man, didn't play last night. He's been hurt. But, they get a little bit of a break, relatively speaking, with South Carolina Saturday. And we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But, they have now shown they can beat some big teams. So I think a Kentucky upset's on the table. And then Georgia, I mean, sometimes it's about things lining up for them. And God knows if there's a program that's had nothing line up its way the last 5 years, it's Vandy. So at some point they deserve to break. But, yeah, you're right. It could get interesting just based on the way the dominoes have started to line up and fall.
Yep. You're at least optimistic now. And that's
and it's been a while since you could be. Yeah. Arkansas, you and I texted a few times, and there's just been something lacking with them. And I texted you back. I said, I think his name is Moses Moody. I think that's part of it, right? They don't have that lead dog. They've got a lot of good players, but nobody who stepped forward to take the role that he took for them so many times a year ago. They got out-rebounded last night. I saw, and my dog is very upset about this.
Calling the Hogs, isn't he?
I think he is calling the Hogs.
Well, somebody needs to call the Hogs, right? Like, maybe that's what they need. So
was it just me? Did you see, I don't know, mental lapses, small lapses of hustle at times? I just saw things out of them in small bits. Maybe these are the things that we come up with to explain something. We have no better alternatives, but you can start to sense a little bit where the cracks are. I don't know what exactly is wrong because I'm not close to that program, but it's not what I've expected from Arkansas, but we've talked about this a while. It's just not the team that we thought we'd be seeing coming into the season for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's a frustrated team, and I think that's the best way to put it at this point. I think there's a lot of frustration because, I mean, we have to remember that there are guys on this team, not many because of the transfers, but, there are guys on this team that were used to sitting pretty at this, last year. And let's keep this in mind, too. I look back at this, and I thought it was interesting. They did have a stretch last year where early January they lost 4 or 5. Much different scenario.
I'd almost forgotten that. Yeah.
But much different scenario. And then after that, I mean, they went on a tear, right? But there's a difference. And yes, the difference is Moses Moody, Justin Smith, those guys. I would be surprised if we see the same kind of, just going on a tear for this team. But the difference is they lost to teams that were good. And I don't mean that, they lost to teams that were already in that NCAA tournament conversation last year when they had that stretch in early January. They lost to teams that were already kind of, were making their move in terms of, we expected those kind of teams. And I'm looking back at it now because I wanted to make sure. So, like, for example, in early January last year, they lost to Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, Alabama. Like, those were all NCAA tournament teams, right? And we knew that at the time. We knew that those were teams that were going to get there probably. But this year, it's like you're losing. And again, we're not taking anything away from Vanderbilt, and I don't, mean that any way towards them. But you're losing games that you feel like you should win, and I think that's the difference. Is you should have beaten Hofstra, right? You probably should have beaten Vanderbilt at home. Mississippi State on the road was going to be tough, but I think they lost to teams that were at a different sort of higher level than maybe where they're losing to some of these other teams right now, and I think that's just something where it is like there's just something's just missing. And I said one of the things I said going the season was I didn't think that they had the depth. I thought the depth was going to be an issue. What are they? I mean, they're 7 deep on a good night. Um, and I think that's with the expectation that all your top guys are going to be on, and they're not. It's like I think that's one of the issues too. Is like, and I say that, and I said this going the season. Some of Musk's best teams have been 7 deep. They haven't had to have a lot of depth, but this is just one of those situations where the pieces aren't clicking. And and we said that happens sometimes when you bring in a lot of transfers. You just don't know if everything's going to sort of mesh together. And I just don't think it has for the most part, because remember, this is a team that started 9-0. But did any of us really feel when they were at 9-0 that they were just this, unbeatable team? I think that's also a difference. Is for those of us who weren't just looking at the record, we sort of expected the possibility of this playing out even in December and even in November, because you just kept watching them and you just kept thinking, yeah, they're winning these games, but man, they are just something's not there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing now. Once you get into the league play and you're playing, like I said, I mean, you're not going to put Vanderbilt in that NCAA tournament conversation just yet, but it's an improving team. Mississippi State, underrated, I think. And, you start off with 2 games like that, and now you're sitting here at 0-2. And luckily, as we talked about, good thing Arkansas has going for them is they've still got the most manageable first half schedule of anyone. They're going to get A&M next and Missouri after that. Then they'll get South Carolina, A&M, Ole Miss, LSU's in there in between them. But they can turn this around pretty quickly. But right now, you don't have a lot of confidence for them to do that, I think.
Yeah, you could see the Mercer opener we both watched. It just didn't look like what we expected. The Reels really started to fall off December 11th when they got blown out. What was it, in Tulsa against Oklahoma? That was the start of losing 4 out of 5. Elon's the only game they've won in a month now. You mentioned the depth. This did not occur to me. Devontae Davis. He played 8 minutes last night, 8:42 to be exact. He was a guy I think we thought would have a bigger role for them. Now, I guess the one thing to flip the discussion around a little bit, look, if one shot is missed or made, then Arkansas wins, and the discussion's probably a lot different. But that's the nature of sports. But I did think that Stanley Umude had a really good game for them. He was the transfer from South Dakota that I thought would have a big impact for them. Put up big numbers in the summit, and 28 points last night. Has a bunch of them early. I guess that's the one bright spot for Arkansas is he looked like the guy that I thought they'd be getting coming into the year.
Yeah, you can lean on that. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of say that I think all these guys have the potential, and maybe that I assume that's probably frustrating for Muss and company is. That all these guys that you bring in, there's a reason why you brought them in, because you thought that they were going to give you the best chance to win games, and and to have an opportunity to put yourself right back in that position you were in last year, whether that's realistic or not. That's what everyone's aiming for, and and like I said, it's there's no way to just completely replace a Moses Moody or Justin Smith. Like I think again, we keep going back to those 2 guys, and that if that was ever the expectation that any of these guys are going to be able to do that, I think that was the wrong expectation. So you're banking on all these guys being able to play up to the level that you expect them to, and that's where right, like you have a guy like Chris Likes who just doesn't have a good game and doesn't play a whole lot. You talked about it with Davis, just doesn't play much. But these are guys that have played minutes throughout the year, a lot of them, And I think it's because they don't, they're not 10 deep necessarily of guys that are just going to play 15 plus minutes a game. And you don't have to be successful. But I think for a team like this, when some of these guys aren't on, you've got to have other guys just, step up elsewhere. And 1 point is the difference, as we said, but that's where the issue becomes with Arkansas. It's like, committee's not going to look back and say, we only lost our Vanderbilt by 1. We're gonna put you in the tournament. And now you go play on the road against the Texas A&M team. You talk about another underrated team. Yeah. They might be getting undervalued as well. I know they only won by 2 at Georgia, but that's going to be a tough game. And if you're looking up at 0-3 in the SEC, not a good place to be for a team potentially that right now has, to this point, they have no quality wins that are going to just completely jump out at the NCAA tournament committee. So we're not even talking about the NCAA tournament at this point for Arkansas. I think we're talking about, how do you sort of right the ship, because that tournament conversation is going to have to come once you actually start winning some of these games against, good teams and not losing to solid teams that may get there, like a Vanderbilt. But these are the kind of games you got to win, and they just haven't thus far.
Yeah, they were 90 in the net a few days ago. I don't know where they dropped to after that one, but it's not going to help. Speaking of A&M, man, I thought Georgia had to win that last night. Okendo hits the layup for Georgia late in the game off a really well-designed play, and then Marcus Williams just buries a 3 with about a second left and just breaks everybody's hearts in Athens. A&M now 12-2, Blake. Has done this a couple times at the buzzer. Henry Coleman, the third, the Duke transfer, really came on for them last night. He gets 23 and 6. Williams gets 18. Quentin Jackson, who's been their stud, only has 8 last night. So they got it done without him having really the kind of game that we're accustomed to him playing.
I think A&M they have guys that, whether it's Jackson, whether it's Coleman, Marcus Williams, Andre Gordon, I think they've got a group that their starting unit can match up with a lot of teams, I think. And I know, again, on paper you're going to look at it and say, well, Georgia's not very good, and they were only able to win this game on the road by 2. But as we always talk about, you'll take anyone on the road you can get in the SEC, I think. I think A&M's going to be very interesting to watch moving forward, because I think that they're another one, just a product of their schedule. They don't have any wins that are just going to wow you. I guess the Notre Dame one's probably the best one they've got to this point. But I still think that they're just the way they play, and the buzz teams, like they're gonna do some things, and they're gonna beat some teams probably that people don't think that they should this season. And so I think that, look, they've got another one. You talk about a nice setup, right? Mm-hmm. We laughed about Vanderbilt maybe being 4-0. A&M's got Arkansas at home, Ole Miss at home, and at Missouri. So their next 3 games, and they just beat Georgia. I mean, they're going to be sitting in a position where they, quite frankly, if they can beat Arkansas, they should be 4-0 probably to start SEC play. So I think this is a team to definitely keep an eye on. And man, that just makes that game against Arkansas on Saturday so much more important, I think, for both teams. If A&M can win that game, that's a significant win heading into a home game against Ole Miss and then at Missouri. But if Arkansas can win it, that maybe starts to right the ship a little bit for them. So yeah, I think A&M is just, even if you just look at this game and go beyond it, I think that they are a very intriguing team. So
yeah, their make or break time is going to start in a couple of weeks. They're sitting here 12-2. The 2 losses, neither are bad. They're to Wisconsin and TCU on neutral floors. They've won a couple away games, although Georgia and Oregon State aren't going to really move the needle for the committee. But you didn't lose them, and that matters. So yeah, I think that's interesting. This was a team that we had a hard time getting a handle on because they just missed so much of their season last year with COVID. They weren't very good when they did play, and I think that with that and all the newcomers, we didn't know what to expect, but I kind of like what I'm seeing so far.
Yep, they look good, and it'll be an important stretch here for them moving forward for sure. So
we haven't talked about Auburn. Oh, my goodness. This dog is going to drive me bananas. and South
That's
Carolina.
right. There's not a lot to talk about with this one. I mean,
No, there's not.
I'll just let you like this game played out the way that we thought it would.
You can hear the pain in Oreo's voice.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn's a better team, and we kind of said that, and we didn't really know what to make of South Carolina. And I still think South Carolina, interesting, but you're not gonna kind of expect them to win games like this, especially against the top team in the SEC, right? We keep talking about how Auburn's probably the best team in the league, and I think your opinion's not gonna change on that after this game. They look good. I think Green is the one that we keep going back to. He's been excellent.
Oh, he was
for them.
Fantastic. Yeah,
and I mean there's a lot of difference makers. Obviously, Kessler's going to be the one that gets a lot of the attention, as Jabari Smith's going to be a top 3 pick in the draft. But I think Green has been very important for them to do what they can do. So, I mean, it's Auburn's good, and as of right now, I think they're certainly your favorite to win the SEC at this point. And I know we're only 2 games in, but it's more than just the SEC games. It's just seeing how they played, and remember too, like they went comfortably last night in that game, even without Allen Flanigan, who was out again. So, they're loaded. They're fantastic, and I think that this is another talk about big stretch, and we'll talk about it in our next video. But they got Florida next at home, and they go to Alabama. So, another opportunity for them to get a couple more statement wins here, and then Auburn's just in a good spot right now.
Are we concerned about Flanigan? All I saw that was health. I don't know if that means the injury's flared up or it's COVID or what.
I had no idea, so I have no clue. I assume he'll be back at some point soon. So,
for Carolina, the thing that I was kind of watching is Chico Carter, who'd been out early, had played really well for them lately. Had, I think, back-to-back 20-point games. Last night he didn't play well, and I think that really cost them.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, one of those things, I think, with teams like this where we said it, it's just a team that you just don't know what to expect, I think, on a night in and night out basis. And I think that's kind of the situation now with this team is we haven't just had a great grasp on them in the non-conference play. They got some good wins, Florida State, UAB, but you're still just not sure what to make of them. They can't have some of those games like they had at Coastal Carolina and all that. So I think South Carolina's a team that you just don't really offensively. They're just not good enough, I think, to be in that position to expect them to beat these top teams. So
yeah, Eric Stevenson did pop up and have a big game for him. I think there's so many transfers. I don't think we talked about him. He came from Washington. He gave them 25 last night, which he's done that from time to time. He was a pretty consistent scorer for them at Washington a year ago. And kind of hit a rut in December. But I think, if you're looking for things to take away positively for Carolina, there's one.
Yep. I mean, you gotta lean on those kind of things right now because, I mean, he is. I mean, he's one that, they'll have to lean on, I think, just based on, how he plays, that they're going to have to if they're going to win games. So, but easily, one of his, probably maybe his best night of the year thus far this season. So, yeah, and we'll see how they regroup. But I think they're going to be one of the more unpredictable teams in the league. So
speaking of that, here's something I wouldn't have predicted. Jermaine Cousinard gives him 3 minutes and 30 seconds 16 minutes and 29 seconds, and Keyshawn Bryant gives him 3.5 minutes. What's up there?
I'll be honest with you. I watched most of this game, but I don't know if did they get injured. At some point, your attention moves elsewhere too.
Yeah, we were watching. We were all watching 3 games at once, and
I'm sure I'll go back as I always do and look more into it. But as of right now, I have, I don't know if that was what it was related to, but I probably shouldn't speak out on something that I didn't exactly watch this game from start to finish, kind of seeing how it was playing out. But so.
Yeah, there was not a lot to watch. Carolina made it interesting for a few minutes midway through the second half. I think they got it to 10, but then it went right back. So, okay, we've got a preview video up for Wednesday night's games. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap those up. Any parting thoughts here, Blake?
No, I don't think so. It's we'll talk about Saturday's games in our next video, and a pretty interesting slate. So.
All right, he's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more videos later this week.